This is my third blog about homelessness, on the readings and on the talks from earlier today, our guest speakers and our discussion in class. So I guess I really like these readings because they tied up a lot of loose ends for me, I think, from my previous experience this year in schools. And I guess my first experience with understanding homelessness outside of just kind of, I guess, the typical living on the streets or living in a car situation was at the very beginning of the last school year at one of the first RTI meetings. We were discussing a boy who had a lot of behavior problems and had just gotten removed from his mother's home and now is with his dad full time. And him and his dad were living with grandma and grandpa. And I mean, a great loving family, really fantastic dad and fantastic grandparents. But our school psychologist sat there and goes, "So he's homeless." And my first reaction was to be like, "Well, no, he's not because he's living with grandma and grandpa and everything else." But then after kind of a discussion, that I realized, okay, so that does still count as homeless because him and his dad are not, living in their own stable home. So that was really, I guess, kind of eye-opening. And then throughout the school year, it came up more and more, and probably about over a third of our class was considered homeless when looking at the actual definitions that we read about, which was surprising. And I think that it's so hard. I can't even imagine in secondary trying to find out that information because my cooperating teacher and I were trying to figure things out. We were having so many problems, and these kids experience so many emotional things at home, and they bring it into the classroom, and there's screaming and yelling and kicking and crying and everything else. So one day, my teacher just said, "Let's find out who these kids live with, everything else." So literally throughout the day, we just pulled them aside and we'd say, "Okay, so who lives at your house?" And they'd be like, "Mom, Dad, Grandma, Grandpa, Aunt, Uncle, Cousin." And some of these kids literally have 10 to 12 people living in their house. They're like, well, and some people move in and out and everything else. So that was really helpful to understand their situations and understand who was in a stable place, who was not in a stable place in terms of a physical living situation. I can't imagine you can't do that in secondary and first grade. You can get away with it because kids like to tell you everything about everything that they experience. So I guess, yeah, this past year has been eye-opening, and then those readings just tied everything together. It was like, oh, these are the actual definitions, and so, like, they're not arbitrary. We're not just defining him as homeless because we can, but there's actually laws about this and everything else. So it was really neat, and I think just being aware of the actual laws about transportation, everything is so helpful because you can give that information to parents even if they don't know about it, and you can kind of advocate if that's indeed their best option and things like that. And so it's really helpful for me. Again, it was just great to tie up loose ends and give me concrete knowledge about all these things that I'd been experienced the past year. So yeah, I think that's about it for today. I can't turn it off. There we go.